4 letters on it, WWJD. And even though I wasn't born in the 90s, I did look up 90s Christian culture on Google, and it was the first image that came up. So even though I was born in 2005, I must be right somehow. But anyway, I wanted to look at the earliest influences that actually said, what would Jesus do? And the man I'm talking about specifically is Charles Sheldon. He tried to apply Christian values to everything, be it politics, Christian life, just anything, and he wrote a book that challenged people to do what Christ would do, no matter the cost. And he wrote a book in the 90s. Okay, I lied, it was 1896, but technically that's still the 90s. But that's neither here nor there. So let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about our first character, Edward Norman. You see, he was editor of the Daily News, which was a newspaper company, and he was all over the news. Since he was the editor, anything that went into the paper went through him. And so he was the name that was displayed in the final mouthpiece. But whenever he made the pledge to do whatever Jesus would do, he realized something. His paper really wasn't showing that much of his Christianity. So he had a decision to make and something to think about. And he probably thought about James 3. Let's turn there tonight. That's James 3. Let's start at the tail end of verse 5. That's James 3 at the very end of verse 5. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a word of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. You see, even though he wasn't physically using his tongue to speak, metaphorically, his tongue was the thing that was controlling the news. It was the thing that showed people what was going on. So he needed to control it, and he was having a hard time. To further compound on this, let's turn to Matthew 15, verses 10 through 11. That's Matthew 15, verses 10 through 11. And just a little bit of context for this verse while you turn. This is whenever the disciples didn't obey the tradition of washing their hands before they ate, and the Jews got annoyed. And he called to the people to him and said to them, "Hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles the person." Through his paper, Edward Norman was defiling himself by putting in things that Christ would not put in. And he definitely followed the example that we heard tonight in Philippians 4:8, which his paper wasn't good, it wasn't honorable, just, commendable, fill in the blank. And so he needed to make a change. And so he decided to do 2 things. The first being, if Christ wouldn't have written it, it doesn't go in the paper. The second being, he would double the amount of content in the Saturday edition so that he could fully cancel the Sunday edition. And nobody liked this. He started to lose subscribers and therefore losing money. His paper company was going to the ground fast. But let's put him aside for a second and talk about Alexander Powers. Alexander Powers was the superintendent of the railroad. Remember, 1890s, this is the biggest form of travel. And whenever he made the pledge, he thought that his pledge was to help the workforce, giving them a safer environment. And even though that was a really good thing to start out with, it wasn't what Christ thought about. You see, he found a paper, and this paper described all the illegal business practices that went on in the company, and him being a superintendent was a part of it. And so he thought about something probably along the lines of Philippians 4:8, which we've already read, and about how it wasn't good, honorable, just, true, or anything to be there. And he probably thought about a verse like Colossians 3:23 through 25. So let's turn there. Colossians 3:23 through 25. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. Usually, whenever we talk about this verse, we focus on the aspect of productivity. Whenever you work for the Lord, you work as hard as you can, and that is true, but I would like to come at it with a different angle tonight. You see, whenever you work for the Lord, you don't undermine your ethics. Whenever you work for the Lord, you don't intentionally push aside evil business practices to make a quick buck. And since love does not delight in wrongdoing but rejoices with the truth, 1 Corinthians 13:6 for those who want to know, he left his position to obey. He actually became the main witness in the lawsuit against this railroad company. And in doing so, he doesn't have a lot of money, and now he's out of a job. He is risking starvation for this. But let's put him aside one more time and talk about my favorite character, Henry Maxwell. The reason my favorite character is Henry Maxwell is quite obvious. He's a preacher. And he has a highly successful church with a lot of good members, but there's a problem, as there always is. You see, in the city, there is this part called the rectangle. And this is the part where the bar is. This is where people came to get drunk and do dumb things. And no Christian ever stepped foot in there. And that's great for purity's sake, but that's a lot of souls that now we aren't reaching. And so Henry Maxwell understood this hypocrisy of the ivory church halls, contrasting with the people who need Christ the most not getting it. So he thought about what Christ would do in this situation, and he probably went to Matthew 9:10-13. Again, that is Matthew 9:10-13. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to the disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." If we truly want to follow Christ's example, we need to go and reach out to those who are hurting and the sinners. And we all need to do this, and Henry Maxwell knew this. We can even see this in one of the biggest parables ever, Luke 15:1-7. So let's turn there because it's fun. Again, that is Luke 15:1-7. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him again, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost.' Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." If we truly want to imitate Christ, we need to leave the 99 and seek the one sinner. And in Henry Maxwell's case, that means leaving the church just for a bit and going to that rectangle and finding someone that might need his help. And so he does do this. He sets up a missionary effort, and he actually gets robbed there. He's in a lot of danger going in that rectangle, but he does it anyway. But now we have something to talk about. You see, I've told you about 3 people. The editor of the Daily News Company, who is now having a failing business, Alexander Powers, the railroad man who now is out of a job and losing money fast, and Henry Maxwell, the preacher who goes out to the rectangle and is endangering his life for it. Now there's one question to ask, and that's, where's God in all of this? Well, let's turn to Matthew 5:13-16. It's Matthew 5:13-16. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. This not only shows us what we should imitate, once again, it also shows us that if we are doing it right, people should notice, and they should be able to glorify God for it. And even if it's just 1 out of 100 people who get the seeds sown in them, the church will be able to develop because of that. And if they become Christians and take a similar pledge, they'll plant more seeds and we can begin to support one another. Supporting one another is hard baked into the Christian. Romans 12, 9 through 13 shows some of the marks of the Christian. Let's turn there. That's Romans 12, 9 through 13. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal, but fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. You see, whenever these 3 men made the pledge, along with a couple others, they began to show the example of Christ. And this pledge began to grow like wildfire. And it eventually grew to one woman, Roland Page. You see, especially for 1890s, she was extremely wealthy. She had a lot of money that she could give. And whenever she made the pledge, she looked at Edward Norman and his failing business and decided to help him out. She gave him enough money to begin his own newspaper company, and Alexander Powers, our railroad man, worked under it. And so now they were secure. And Henry Maxwell, along with many others, actually started a great mission effort in the rectangle. And it worked really well, because God provides. It might not be physical, it might not be emotional, but spiritually, God always provides. And these people sowed the seeds just like we should. And the church can develop and support one another, as I have said, but we can really only do that for one reason. You see, if Christ never came and died for the cross, we would have no hope. And that leaves about 2 options. Either God does not exist and we're all in trouble, or God does exist and we're all sinners without repentance and we are all in trouble. But that's not the case. Because God loved the world so much that he sent his son to die on that cross. And whenever he did that, he made repentance for our sin. And the only reason we are able to imitate Christ is because Christ gave us something to imitate. So tonight, if you have any need, or if you would like to begin to imitate Christ, or if you have any other need, please come as we stand and as we sing.